Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert and you're listening to our continued Iditarod coverage here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site. You can hear all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to check us out on social media by searching Dogworks Radio. And I'm joined by my co-host Toni Reitter, calling in from Kenai, Alaska. Toni, how's it going today?
Going pretty well. I have not gotten any of my chores done because this supposedly very easy Friday of racing turned into one of the most dramatic days. So I'm really excited to talk about today.
It sure has. And I am in the middle of nowhere taking a wilderness first responder research, so I did not get a chance to really look up anything here in who knows where I'm at in Washington. But we did have a very interesting day. Let's see. Last night we had, I believe it was 20 mushers that had come into Nome at that point. So we have from 21 down to 32 come in today. The last two mushers in, it looks like, are Matt Paviglio and Karin Hendrickson. And in our Red Lantern place, we have Yuka Honda, followed by Eric Kelly, Apayak Raitan, Kaylin Davis, and then we have an interesting story or two about the next two mushers that were on the list. But we're going to get to that in just a second. Oh boy, it has been a crazy day, according to Toni. She just caught me up on everything before we went on air. And it's interesting because over the last couple of years, not counting last year with the crazy trail that they ran, but the last few full Iditarods, we have had some very interesting developments here at this section of the race, this last third of the race. And today was no different at all. We had some medical evacs. We've had people that are stuck on the trail for hours. We have had all kinds of crazy stuff. So before we talk about the evacs, what do you know about that group of mushers that sort of stuck?
Sure. Well, the evacs were also part of that group that got stuck. Everyone leaving White Mountain last night, early this morning, have been stuck somewhere between White Mountain and safety, with most of them staying there in the Topcock Hills. There we go. For basically most of the day. It's just been in the last hour or so that the teams that have been in the hills have made it to that shelter cabin that Brent Sass was trying to get to the night that he won Iditarod, and he was stuck for a couple of hours because of wind. It sounds like instead of wind gusts, they've just been getting hit by 45-mile-an-hour winds all day. And it's coming right at them or to the side. And Mitch Seavey actually posted a video explaining what trail conditions were like when he came through a couple of days ago, and he said he could only imagine that if anything, the trail was going to be even slicker than what he said. He said it was nothing but glare ice, and that the way that the sleds ran, they didn't run flat, they ran on their side. And so all it took was a little gust of wind, and if it caught your sled, you were going to roll down the hill. So it sounds like that's what these teams have been dealing with for the last, I'm going to say 14 hours, give or take. Riley Dyke was the first one out. He was also the first one to make it to the shelter cabin. He left, I guess, before the wind got really bad. And then the teams that followed knew that they were going to deal with the wind, and so they felt they were a little more prepared, but they all hunkered down behind hills and other topography that they could just bunker down and wait for a lull in the wind, which apparently they got one not too long ago. So yeah, it's been a really interesting day of orange flags in the Topcock Hills. And then, yeah, they haven't even gotten to the really bad section known as the blowhole yet. So I'm sure they're all just dying to keep going.
Right. And Toni, can you tell our listeners why they call that area the blowhole?
Yeah, it's basically, if you think of like a wind tunnel, that's what you're going to get from the straight stretch into safety. Once they come out of the hills, there's that shelter cabin, which is at the top of the blowhole, and then they go straight down into this area that just is really, just the way that the land is built up in the ocean right there, it just becomes its own little windstorm, and it's always windy, but when they have the stronger wind gusts, it becomes just impossible to even go forward, is my understanding. We saw it play out really strong the other night when Brent and Dallas were running to Nome, and then it made itself truly famous in recent history, at least in 2014, because that's the area that we saw Jeff King get blown so off course that he had to scratch. Of course, Allie said it was the craziest it had ever been that she'd seen, and she thought that she was going to die, so she stayed in safety once she got there. Dallas decided, he'd keep going just because his dogs were going to be in the wind anyway, and if he can come going forward, that's better than making them stop because they'll never start again. So it's one of those parts of the trail that's got its own legend going, much like the Dalzell Gorge in the first third. The blowhole gives rookies and veterans alike nightmares when they think about it. So I don't know what the plan is for the teams all hunkered down there at the cabin now. I assume they're all going to try and go together. But it'll be really interesting to see if the blowhole lives up to its reputation tonight.
And you have a little bit of an update on Sean Williams. He is part of that pack, but he is sort of on his own. What do you know about him?
I haven't seen anything. My friends that are in Nome right now, I guess Martin Boozer just did a talk today. He didn't mention Sean specifically because, of course, Sean is running his puppy team. But he basically told the people there at the talk that, these mushers are going to be another day or so before they're even close to coming in. He said at one point, one of my friends said that he said, we won't see anybody for 2 days, which I think is Martin just being a little dramatic. But there again, I don't know what the wind forecast is for this weekend. I know that there's an advisory through Saturday morning. So it may be that Sean's just still hanging out there, but I'm looking right now on Martin's page and there's nothing, and Sean doesn't really have like a social media page. He has a personal page, but I don't see any updates on that either. So Sean's kind of he's the one that nobody's talking about, so I'm going to assume no news is good news.
Yeah, so it looks like you said, at least a little while before the rest of these guys get in. What about the back of the pack? Before we get to our mushers that have had to have an evacuation, do you know anything about those guys towards the back there?
They also had their own drama. They, of course, came from Elim and Golovin up to White Mountain today, and it was slow going, especially once they hit Golovin, and for a variety of reasons. Kaylin Davis ended up being the first one into White Mountain, with Apayak coming in shortly thereafter, which was kind of surprising when, you look at the current standings and you see who left Elim when. But that's because right out of Golovin, both Eric Kelly and Yuka Honda took a right turn when they should have gone straight. And so they had spent several hours on the wrong trail and had to double back and go back to the main trail. Some folks on Twitter were looking at the map from 2020 and they guessed that they might have been on the trail that Iditarod used back in 2020 to reroute the Elam 11 that we talked about the other night to get them around the overflow. And so people started worrying that maybe that was the issue again, that, you know, you had two mushers trying to cross very dangerous sea ice. But that's not the case. The trail was fine. It was just two wayward souls deciding they wanted to take more miles than the already 900 and some odd miles that this race is. So just a little fun Friday afternoon jaunt through extra Iditarod Trail.
Wow. Yeah, definitely a lot of drama here, but it does not end there. We had two separate medical evacuations today. Who are they and what happened?
So the first one was Gebhard Diart, and I'm sure I mispronounced his last name, but I think that's how I asked a friend how I was supposed to. She knows him, how to say his name, and I think I understood how she wrote it out for me. He's running Mitch Seavey's puppy team. He's the rookie from South Africa. Even though you hear South Africa and you think he doesn't have a lot of experience, he is an experienced dog driver. He cut his teeth in dryland racing and then moved to the United States in, I believe, either Minnesota or Wisconsin to kind of cut his teeth on the winter sports side of things before coming up to Alaska and training with Mitch for a couple of years. So he ended up, while he was trying to navigate the hills and the ice and the wind, he managed to somehow crash his sled in a way that he injured his right foot. And when a snow machiner happened upon him, he asked for help because he just knew that he'd broken his foot. Then they came upon Bridget Watkins, who is the other musher that had to be evac'd today. She had broken her collarbone, and so the SOS button at some point was pressed, but Gerhardt was starting to show signs of hypothermia. So he was driven back by the snow machiner to White Mountain, where they were able to not only get him attention, but relay information that Bridget was still out there, plus there were two dog teams that needed to be attended to. So search and rescue went out to at least be there until help could arrive. They got Bridget back to White Mountain. Gerhardt flew out on a helicopter, and then Bridget was going to fly out on an airplane, but ended up getting a commercial flight from Bering Air, is my understanding of the reports that Insider was giving on their live stream. So it was a very dramatic few hours as, of course, everyone was going through the rumor mill, trying to figure out what was up and what was down. The trail sweeps that were following the back of the pack, they made it to White Mountain, of course, before Yuka and Eric. And so they grabbed supplies and immediately left to go retrieve Bridget and Gerhardt's dogs, which, looking at the trackers, it looks like both teams may be very close to White Mountain if they're not in there already. So very exciting and dramatic afternoon on the Iditarod Trail. One that was very hard to keep track of.
Yeah, for sure. And was that part of that same area, that really windy area where the other guys are sort of holed up right now?
Yeah, it was pretty close. It was at mile 9:11, I think, is what where it happened, or 9:14, somewhere in there. I believe it was actually really close to where Sean Williams is sitting right now, looking at the GPS. But he apparently is doing okay. Otherwise, his tracker would be moving backwards too by this point, is my guess. So, they were all really bunched up together. You had, I think, five teams all just hunkered within like half a mile of each other. But now they're all at the cabin except for Sean Williams and the two that, of course, had to fly out of White Mountain today.
So I have a question. I'm a dog musher, and I have never come across this on my own, obviously. But who takes care of their dogs if they have to be flown out for a medical evac or whatever? I assume it's the checkers or the vet techs or somebody like that. But do they have a special team that takes care of dogs other than, say, the drop dog crew? At the checkpoints, I'm saying.
It's pretty much like how they do it when they have a team that scratches, because that's essentially what's happened here. Is two mushers have scratched, so they both have their dogs. They're at the checkpoint. The difference is
there's no musher.
There's the added element of the medical evac, but there are times when a musher gets out before the dogs get out during a regular scratch as well. So it's the volunteers that are at the checkpoint that'll be taking care of them. Thankfully, they're in White Mountain, so it's not that hard to get them out and over to Nome to get them back to Anchorage or Fairbanks, whichever way they're shipping them once they get them to Nome.
And that was actually my next question. And I know that if a dog is dropped on that side of the trail, it goes to Nome, and then, of course, it's the musher's job, I guess, to get them back. Is this the same for this type of scenario? They would go to Nome first and then back to Anchorage, or just right back to Anchorage?
No, my understanding is they go straight to Nome, and then they'll rejoin probably their mushers, since I'm sure they were both taken to Nome because that's the closest medical facility other than the little clinic that's in White Mountain. And then they'll be shipped out like they had planned to ship them out when they reached Nome. So it's a little easier than, if they were somewhere in the middle of nowhere, like Cripple or whatever.
And have you heard or seen any interesting stories there in Nome? Maybe not even just at the finish, but some of the goings-on. And I asked that because during this Iditarod time, they do other things, obviously, besides the Iditarod. They have, at one point, they used to have like a golf tournament on the sea ice, and they would put up these little trees that they would call the Nome National Forest, and they would do other types of events. Have you seen anything that's going on this year, or is it sort of COVID, everything shut down type stuff?
No, that was the really exciting thing. Nome, their visitor center, they put out a calendar and maps specific to the Iditarod happenings. So they did the Iditarod basketball tournament that they always hold. I believe they did do the golf. I'm pretty sure Nome Forest is out there this year. They did the Lutheran, I think it's the Lutheran church that does the soup, supper, and auction fundraiser every year. That's always really good because you end up with muskox stew and moose stew and all the different things that you wouldn't normally have unless you live at my parents' house. You get all of that. And it looks like, I think tonight is going to be a Hobo Jim tribute at the local bars that he used to play at during Iditarod finish time. So all of the normal happenings are happening this year. They didn't. They got canceled in 2020. So this is the first time in a while that they've gotten to really go all out as they normally would in Nome for Iditarod finish week.
And one last thing about Nome, you probably know this story better than I, but is it the Board of Trade saloon that was owned by Wyatt Earp or Doc Holliday, one of those guys?
My dad will be very disappointed that I don't remember which bar it was that Wyatt Earp was the owner of. But yeah, one of the bars there on Front Street was owned by the famed Wyatt Earp. They even have like a little bust statue of him on Front Street in one of the buildings that he either lived in or owned or something, and he's got his own section in the Nome Museum, which was so cool. If you go to Nome and don't go to the new Nome Museum, you have missed out on so much. It's one of the best museums I've ever been to. Now, I haven't been to the Smithsonian or anything, but as far as small community museums, this one is right up at the top of the list.
And also, since we're on this Nome kick right now, If you're ever planning to go to Nome for the finish, I highly suggest that you book your hotels and all of that stuff well ahead of time. I know it's a tough road to haul if you're trying to get a room up there and you just decided to go up there in February or whatever. How soon out do you need to get them, you think, Toni?
I have actually booked rooms when I know that, or at least I am really, truly playing around with going to Nome. I actually book about halfway through Iditarod the year prior to. Now, sometimes a hotel will tell you, no, you have to wait. But I just keep calling until they finally give me a room. Because it is hard. Just to give people perspective, there are 3 hotels. There used to be 4. There are now 3 hotels that you can stay at. There are also a few Airbnbs, and then local community members will rent out their room or their floor or their couch, and you can stay there, or you can maybe possibly get, bunk on the floor of one of the churches. But if you want a hotel that's the basic amenities, but you're paying like Hilton prices, you need to book as soon as possible. It's first come, first serve, and a lot of the hotel rooms get booked up by Iditarod pros very early on. You also have several tour groups that come up for the finish, and they block out a bunch of rooms for that. So if you know somebody who runs one of the tours, that's another way to kind of get an in, because they always book more rooms than they end up needing, and so they'll release those about 2 weeks before Iditarod starts. So you just got to keep your eye and your ear on the pulse of all of that stuff. And then you can also contact the Nome Visitor Center and get put on a list so that they can contact you to let you know when an Airbnb or somebody's renting a room, anything comes available, they can put you on that wait list.
Yeah, and one of them just recently burned down. It was just a few years ago, one of those smaller...
It was my hotel.
Oh, no, the one you stayed at. Yes. Yeah, so that really put a dent in things. And you know what I always find very interesting? And I know this is Iditarod adjacent talk, but I think our listeners will find it interesting because obviously nobody really talks about this stuff on an Iditarod podcast. It's just that whole flavor of Nome. And one of the things I think is the coolest is the cab system up there, and how everybody gets around on these cabs, and it's gypsy cab to the max. I mean, these do not even look like cabs, and at least during the off season, it's typically like $5 or $8 to go just about anywhere you need to go in town. I don't know what it is in Iditarod, but they do not have Uber. They do not have regular taxis. You're lucky if you get a rental car. The hotels are really sporadic. I don't know if they're on Booking.com or anything like that. There's only
you can't book online. You have to call.
You have to call. There's only a handful of restaurants, probably maybe 5-ish, I would say, maybe 10, I guess, if you count the little cafes. And, it is rural Alaska, but it's one of the larger villages in Alaska. So there's things to do, but I think people will be very surprised if they decide to come up to Nome for a week before or during Iditarod. There's going to be a lot of empty time on your hands unless you do a lot of these other events like Toni mentioned. There's just not a lot going on in a town of 5,000 or so people in the middle of nowhere. Is that right?
Yeah, I tell people, don't plan on renting a car. For starters, they charge you by, I think, the 12-hour, not the 24-hour. And it's going to run you, even for a small car, over $200 a day. So, and then you have to pay for the gas on top of that, which if you think gas is bad right now, you're looking at California prices and maybe a little bit even more expensive. I don't actually know what the gas prices are in Nome this year. So it's a little bit of a culture shock for a lot of people. I'll read reviews about the hotels, and you read them, and you can definitely tell people were expecting, for the price that they were paying, they were expecting something that you would find in the lower 48 or even in some places like in Anchorage and Fairbanks that are, have all of the amenities and it's, just really posh and there's a spa or whatever. You're not going to get that. There is one hotel that feels a little more modern than the others, but you're not going to get free Wi-Fi. You're not going to get they nickel and dime, and they have to because that's how they survive as well. Everything is nickel and dimed to them from the energy companies and all of that. So it is a little bit of a culture shock, even for someone like me who lives in Kenai, Alaska, which anywhere else it would be considered a rural town, but in Alaska it's considered one of the bigger cities in Alaska. So it is, like you said, it's a flavor. I've been saying this whole time that I am gnome sick, and I really am. I've only been twice, but I absolutely love it. It's so much fun. You can walk pretty much to anything that you're wanting to do. There are other things that you can do, but you have to be able to search them out because, again, most of this you can't book online. So if you want to take a snow machine tour out to Muscat, go to the visitor center. That is going to be your hub, is the visitor center. If you want to know what is happening at any given time, what tours are available, what random Joe is willing to take you on a snow machine to the Safety Roadhouse or even out to White Mountain, go to the visitor center. They are going to be your best friends. Their building is small, but it's warm. It's got a lot of Iditarod swag there. It's a lot of fun. And then you can always just hang out at Iditarod HQ, which just is a little further down from the Nugget Inn. And that's where you can get free Wi-Fi, FYI, and charge your phone. So pro tip there. And you can follow along on the GPS tracker and hobnob with all of the musher family and friends and the mushers that come in after the race is over.
So there you have it from our professional gnome tour guide, Toni. She can definitely give you the ins and outs. I think she's been there for Iditarod more than I have. I think I've only been there twice, and it is an
okay. So we've tied.
Oh, we're tied. So it definitely is an experience, and it's something you don't want to miss. Another thing that you do not want to miss will be coming up, hopefully before the banquet, which happens on Sunday late afternoon, early evening, is the Red Lantern, and that is awarded to the last musher on the trail. Almost every sled dog race that I've ever been a part of has a Red Lantern award. Fortunately or unfortunately, I have 2 Red Lanterns on my trophy shelf, and a little fun fact, my daughter Nicole, she ran Junior Iditarod twice. Her first year, she got the Red Lantern Award for Junior Iditarod, and the second year, she was middle of the pack. So a lot of kudos to her, but she is the proud recipient of a Red Lantern Award as well. The Red Lantern Award sometimes is a much celebrated award by the musher. I know that for years, I don't know if they still live there or not, but for years, there was a Red Lantern musher that lived in Willow, where I live, and they had that painted on their car. It said John Smith, Red Lantern Award, Iditarod, 1989 or whatever it said. So that was sort of like his badge of courage. But that there's a reason for that, and the reason being is because those guys, of course, they obviously didn't win. They came in last place, but it shows tenacity and perseverance and grit and courage and all that comes with it. And often the Red Lantern Award winner has just as much press as some of these other mushers, whereas the people that finish right in front of them, not a lot's going on with those guys. But the Red Lantern is very celebrated, isn't it, Toni?
It is, and Perry Solomonson actually lives in Nikiski, Alaska, so just down the road from me, and I believe he's a 2-time Red Lantern recipient. I know he's gotten it at least once, and he's another one that he has it on the side of his truck. He had little trading cards made up, and that's the big thing that's written on the front of the trading cards, and So it is a huge deal because it's, like you said, it's proof that they did it. Yeah, they didn't come into the money. Yeah, they didn't come in first. But they finished, and that's a huge deal. And there's a lot of history behind the Red Lantern and why races even have a Red Lantern. It's not just the Iditarod that does it, though. I think they're the ones that kind of made it famous or popular. But it is. It's a coveted award, and I love that our sport celebrates the final person across the finish line.
Yeah, and as we mentioned a few nights ago, in years past, I know this hasn't happened in a while, but in years past, if the musher comes in after the banquet, the Red Lantern musher comes in after the banquet, they've held a special banquet just for the Red Lantern winner. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I didn't have time to look because I was too busy watching Orange Flags Go Nowhere today, so clearly I didn't do my homework. But I can't remember when the last one was, but I can remember when Cindy Abbott, I think it was Cindy Abbott, who came in as Red Lantern. The finishers banquet had started, it was in the middle of it, and they realized that Cindy was coming in the next few minutes. So everyone left the banquet and met her at the finish line, cheered her in. It is a very celebrated accomplishment, and not just from fans. It's from each musher. It's from the officials. Mark Nordman will be there to welcome them in. It doesn't matter what time of day or night. So it's pretty exciting. I assume that this might be a year that they're going to have something for the Red Lantern winner after the banquet. If these winds don't die down and allow any of these teams to go, there might be 11 mushers, or not 11 now, 9 mushers who don't get to go to the finishers banquet at this point. Yes.
And there's a couple of other things that happen at the end of the race, aside from that person receiving the Red Lantern. They also have what is called the Willow's Lamp, and that is the lamp that's hanging on the burled arch, and it is not to be confused with the Red Lantern Award. It is my understanding, and I don't know if this is happening because of COVID, is that widow's lamp stays lit until the last musher is over the finish line, and I believe that person extinguishes that lamp. And that story goes back in the day, they would have these lamps, these oil-style lamps, in the roadhouses along the trail, not just the Iditarod Trail, but all over. And that would signify that the roadhouse was open, or they were accepting visitors, or whatever. And it was sort of like a vacancy sign at a hotel, that is, that we'll leave the lights on for you type deal, to know that here's a roadhouse and you can definitely stop in and do what you have to do. And then the other thing that they can do that a lot of folks that aren't big-time fans don't know about or have not listened to our podcast per se is there's a huge lighted star as you head out of Anchorage on your way to Eagle River or the Matsu Valley that they light right around Christmas time. It's sort of like a Christmas decoration. And I believe it is on the Army base's land. But somebody takes care of that, and that stays lit until the Red Lantern winter. So all the way through the holidays, all the way through the New Year, all the way through Iditarod until that last musher comes in. I don't know if they do it exactly at the same time or within that evening, but that signifies to everybody in Anchorage or in the South Central that Iditarod is over until next year. It's sort of that, there it is, that sort of, that guiding light, if you will, for everybody that lives in town. And I think that is such a cool thing about Anchorage and a tradition that's been going on for many years. As a matter of fact, earlier this year, there were a few bulbs that were burned out on that star, and it has to be huge because you can see it for miles. And I guess that they were really having a struggle to have somebody go up there and fix it. I don't know if it was a funding issue or a weather issue or whatever, but I believe that is fixed now. And when I drove out of Anchorage the last time, it was fully lit. Did I miss anything about the end of the race or traditions or anything like that?
I don't think you did. I think you did a really good job of summarizing the importance as well as the tradition behind the Red Lantern Award and why we celebrate the back of the pack as much as the front.
Yeah, and of course, not to mention all of the stories, and we probably would have never heard an in-depth story about the two evacs, and of course, those groups of mushers that are stuck on the trail if you didn't have Insider or a podcast like ours. So I guess that's a little tap on the back for both of us for having a little bit of tenacity on our own to keep this rolling. So, Toni, let's roll over to our musher profile for the evening. We have just 3 left. So we have tonight is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we have something really cool for Sunday. Toni, please don't let the cat out of the bag yet. It's something we've never done on Sunday, and I'm really looking forward to it. So who are we talking about tonight?
We're going to talk about Apayak Raitan. She is an Iditarod veteran. She ran her rookie race in 2019. I actually got to see her come in. She came in right after the CB puppy team, so I was actually in the chute when she came through that year. But she is a second-generation Iditarod musher. Her dad ran, and she's actually run I think he ran in 2019 as well. And so she's got a lot of experience behind a dog team. She grew up in both Norway and in the Kaktovik area of Alaska, where her family has a polar bear viewing tour, where they take tourists out to photograph bears. She's an amazing photographer in her own right, not just with polar bears, or with dog teams. She's got great photos of both, but she also has wonderful landscapes. She's got some aurora pictures on her photography page that are just stunning. So she's more than a dog musher. She is also the first transgender woman to run the Iditarod. Of course, last year the first transgendered person finished Iditarod, but she is the first woman to do so. She flew a giant transgender flag behind her in the ceremonial start, which was the only way I would have known who she was, just because she was so bundled up when she came through our area, and I could not see her bib because she whipped right through. That was the only way I knew, that's who that is. So she's very proud of her accomplishments, as well as who she is, which she should be. I believe her story is that once she finished a very difficult Iditarod in 2019, she decided it was time to accept herself fully. And so she came out to her family at that point, and then she just came out to the world with her truth. I believe last summer was when she made the announcement. I'd have to go back and re-look at that. Like I said, I did not do my homework like I should have. But she's very vocal on social media, especially Twitter. She has an Instagram account and a Facebook account, but she's really found mostly on Twitter, where she's vocal about mushing and queer rights and transgender life. And that's where she shares her photography every once in a while. But I've really enjoyed following her Twitter as she goes through life mushing with Your Life Seth Olsum. That's who she's running dogs from, and the puppy team. And it's just been really neat to see her kind of blossom and take on her own life, instead of just doing the family business gig. But she's kind of branched off on her own this year.
And this is the family that we spoke about a couple of nights ago that ran Iditarod, her and her dad, and then they went up and did a couple of races in the Kotzebue area, I believe the Kobuk 440, and then didn't they mush all the way home as well?
They did, yeah. They mushed the Arctic Circle after Iditarod, just for the fun of it. I think they said something about how it was cheaper than trying to fly the dogs home. So.
Yeah, and I'm looking at that map right now of what it would be potentially in miles from Nome to Katowice. It looks just as far, if not farther, than it would be on Iditarod. It's a heck of a distance. It's all the way around and all the way up around the top of Alaska to get there from Nome there on the Seward Peninsula. So a heck of a long way. So that's
yeah, I think they didn't get home until like mid-April.
Wow. Yeah, that's a heck of a long time on a dog sled, that's for sure. But hey, if you want to see Alaska, that's the way to do it. And I don't know much about her or her family. I've just started following her on Twitter this year. And reading all the stories, and I read the stories from a lot of these guys. And you're right. The stuff that she takes pictures of is awesome. I'm looking at their website right now, and if she took these photos, these are like National Geographic worthy. I mean, these are awesome,
right? Yeah,
awesome looking
I'm jealous
photos
of her talent. Like when I first saw her stuff, I shut her website off. I was like, oh, I am never going to be this good.
Yeah, they are amazing, and you can find her website by going to her profile over on Iditarod.com, and it has that the website, and it's KatowicTours.com, and that first photo on the homepage of the polar bear will just blow you away. That's something like you would see in a gallery for sure. So yeah, kudos to her and everything that she's doing, and the press that she's gotten this year. I know she had a big-time interview in, I think it was Esquire magazine or something very similar to that. Are you familiar with that article?
I don't remember which one it was. I'm not sure if it was Esquire. I didn't actually get a chance to read it because it came out, I think, Iditarod start weekend, and
yep.
So I never get a chance to catch up from that weekend.
Yeah, so definitely check her out. Definitely check her out on Twitter. Very active, and I'm sure she'll jump right back into that after Iditarod and give us a heck of an update. So she appears to be a pretty good writer as well. So that was our musher profile of the evening. We have one left. I guess is it my choice, Toni?
It's your turn.
Oh my goodness! I do not know if we had decided on one that we talked about before, but let's talk about. Let's see. How about let's talk about Riley Deich? I think that's a good one to talk about. Young musher, not a lot of folks know about. He was also an interview on our show, I believe it was last year. Heck of a nice guy, and he's got a pretty impressive history for being a younger musher, and I think he is going to be that next generation of mushers that becomes a household name like so many are today. So we're going to talk about Riley next, and then we have something special for you on Sunday. Toni, what did we miss before we go?
Haven't missed anything. It doesn't look like we're moving at all on the Iditarod Trail, other than the teams that are trying to get moved back to White Mountain after having to medevac their mushers out. So it looks like this is a time to go ahead and get the household chores done because nobody's moving till the wind stops.
Yes, and we will be back on tomorrow. We will be on Sunday, and if we do not have a Red Lantern winner by the time we do our Sunday show, you might just have to put up with us for one more night. I haven't even spoken to Toni about this, but we always say that we will, quote unquote, leave the lights on for you, just like they do the Widow's Lamp and that holiday star up there in the mountains. Toni, it was a pleasure again, and on behalf of my co-host and myself. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
From DogWorks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for DogWorks Radio.